Okay, Wes. So you are a principal engineer at GoDaddy in the commerce department. Um, what else can we say about you?
Let's see. Got two kids, like doing a lot of that stuff, hanging out with kids. But mostly just guy trying to build cool stuff. Have fun doing that. Other than that, it's pretty typical. Typical life, typical engineer, you know, not a
Nice.
ton much else to say.
And you came from Skyverge, you right? You
I
were
did.
so quick overview of what Skyverge is.
Yeah, so Skybridge is a small company. Their bread and butter was WordPress plugins, especially commerce plugins. And I joined to help them build up their email marketing app that they had that was called Jilt. So I was their first front end hire, and they were trying to get this SaaS app started that was also connected to WordPress and Shopify for email automations, broadcasts, and all that stuff for merchants. Um, so yeah, I joined them. I was there for about a year, and then they were acquired by GoDaddy, and that's how I ended up at GoDaddy. Was through that, and then from GoDaddy, I've branched out. I don't do anything WordPress, but we've all still stayed in the commerce space for them.
Cool. Cool. So one of the things I appreciate about you is you're a guy who likes to jump onto like new technology. So you're always like looking for new stuff. You're trying out the new stuff that's coming out. You're like messing with your workflow. You come up with all this stuff that then I get to copy without doing all the work, which I enjoy.
I mean,
So
it's a good and
yeah,
bad thing, though, right?
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
always changing, but
yeah.
always trying to. I never get anything stable enough to be really
Mhm.
happy with it, so that's kind of a problem. But yeah, I'd say for the
Yeah,
most part, I do like trying new stuff.
yeah. Um, so I want to talk to you about AI.
Yeah,
I want to talk about a couple of things. One is like just the impact it's had on us as software engineers, because it's been crazy just in 2025 alone, in like less than the last year. I feel like the last 6 months has just been crazy. And then adopting that new workflow, and then like what tools and stuff you're using now to be really productive, and kind of like thoughts on it. So I don't have like a real big plan, but I think maybe where we can start is just like a year ago, we were writing code, like mostly we were writing most of our own code. And then for the past like decades or whatever, however long you've been an engineer before that, we were just kind of doing this all on our own. In the last like 6 months, maybe a year, we're now writing much less code. Like how much code would you say that you write now on your own?
I mean, actually typing it in probably 5%
Yeah.
um, of my code. But I mean, I think that it's important though to reframe how we're talking about it. And I've been thinking about this more though. Is like we're still writing the code. We're just not actually typing it in, or at least we should be
Right.
writing the code, even if we're using AI. It's just another tool, just like how we had IntelliSense and like Tab Complete for so much stuff. Like we didn't always write like the name of the function out or stuff like that, right? Or even in terminals, we would just go back to the previous command and we could like tab to fill in the thing. I mean, to me, the way that I'm trying to look at it is AI really is just a tool. It will output code, but it's more like we still should be looking at it like we're still writing the code. We're still the owner of that code. And so I think it's important to frame that for people because who just are like, oh yeah, AI writes everything and does everything. And that's the wrong view because you're going to get a bad output. Right. And we can talk
Yeah.
about that too. But yeah, I mean,
But it's
from
different
a,
though. Like it's
it is
very
different.
different. Like I mean,
It
you
is
could
very
say
different.
you're still writing the code, but it's so
No,
different.
you're not writing the code, but you're in control of the code, or
You're
you should
planning.
be.
It's like you're planning it
Yeah.
and iterating and manipulating it.
Yeah. Or, I mean, maybe the way that I'm trying to do it now, and maybe this is also a side effect of the work that I'm doing, is like I'm adding a lot of new endpoints to an API right now. And I'm having AI write it all, but I know exactly what I want it to do. Right. So it's kind of no different than if I were to write it by hand. It's just, I mean, using another tool to save time, which is awesome and fantastic. Um, so in that sense, like it's not that different because it's writing it exactly how I would have written it because I have so many high conventions in that code base that I can say, go look at this file. This is exactly what I want you to do. This is actually, and I still plan with the LLM. So I come up with a plan. I break down all the small tasks and I walk through it and say, okay, now you're going to go do this. Now go create the repository file and follow this exact convention and implement it. And it comes out exactly how I wrote the other services by hand. And so in that
Mhm.
sense, it feels like it's just a really fast way of doing it, which is fantastic
Mhm.
and amazing. And I love that. But I'm doing less and less of just greenfield stuff with the AI, trying to let it write everything. Because
Yeah.
the more I've done that, the more I've gotten to a place where I'm like, I really don't know what's going on, or I have an issue that I then have to go through and debug that. It takes me a lot longer. And so I'm just like, this probably would have been faster if I did just plan with
Mhm.
AI and then wrote it myself. So unlike some side
Mhm.
stuff that I have, I'm like integrating with Stripe and Stripe Connect and like building a platform that will accept payments and registrations for classes and stuff like that. I had AI plan all that, but I'm writing it by hand because I need to understand it and I need to know how this crucial part of this app works
Mhm.
for the business, right? And so I don't want to just hand that off
Mhm.
um, to them. So all that to say, has drastically changed the way that we code 100%. But I want to be careful that it doesn't take away the ownership of the
Right.
code and the
Yeah.
responsibility of the engineer to output good code, even if an LLM did the actual writing of that code.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, I do think like my own ability to code has atrophied a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And because I'm still writing code by hand like every day, it's probably not the majority of the code that gets written, but because when you're in an existing project and you're just adding small things, it's almost easier, especially if it's across multiple files and you just have this large context of how the whole project works. Oftentimes it's easier for you to go do those changes than to explain to the LLM how to go do those. And so I still write a lot of code just because I'm working in these big projects that are existing. But when you're setting up something new and you have documentation on it or whatever, it's easy to just have the LLM spin something up. And I find myself using it for like to write algorithms and stuff. And then when
Mm-hmm.
I go to try to write those algorithms, I'm like, oh man, like I kind of forgot how to do this. And it'll come back, but it just is slower. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, play that out for like 5, 10 years, and I won't know how to code anymore. And then, like, what does that mean as a professional software engineer? Does that mean I can't ever get a different job at a different company because I can't pass their code review? Like, what, you know?
Yeah. I mean, code reviews and interviews are all going to change too. And I think they already
Yeah.
are. But yeah, I mean, I agree.
Yeah.
There's an atrophy. And maybe that's part of why I'm even pushing back on like personally having the LLM write everything, or especially for like new or novel stuff, is just because I did feel that, and like that's part of the reason. Like I used to use AMP and VS Code, and I mean a lot of things to you, like saying like I like the CLI better. I just really stuck with it because I think VS Code, I didn't like editing code in VS Code, especially with like the Vim key mappings and all that stuff. They were too different, or like it was all glitchy, and so it just was more frustrating. So then I would just default to using an LLM to try to write everything because I didn't want to deal with the hassle of like removing Vim key maps and like all the normal like selecting with the mouse and everything. And so now I'm trying to find that happy medium of the right tool that allows me to edit quickly and efficiently, but also jump to an LLM to use that in the appropriate times where I'm like, this really doesn't need to be written by code just because it's repetitive or it's a known convention or something like that, right?
Mhm.
I mean, like I think it's fantastic. I just used it for and creating a pre-signed URL for uploading stuff to S3. Like, I don't really want to have to go and have to re-look up how to do that. I know how to do
Mhm.
it. I know the general practices, but I was like, okay, let's see what an LM can do. And it did a good job planning it, did a good job implementing it. So I think using it for things like that are really good because I mean, you don't really need to have that memorized on how to generate pre-signed URLs with S3 so you can do that in your sleep. You just need to know when and why you want to do that, and then you
Yeah.
can have an LLM go and do that, right? But
Yeah.
yeah,
It's great. It's great for that stuff where you're like, I could just go like reread the CDK documentation on like how exactly where I pass this ARN, what property is that again? But like it's useless knowledge. It really is. And
mm-hmm.
so having an LLM do stuff like that, I love. But then when I find like I feel like I'm forgetting how to write code, I don't like that.
Yep,
But I want to ask, so what is your current, so you use a lot of LLM coding tools, and then so what's your current coding stack? What is your IDE? What is your LLM tool of choice?
yeah. Currently, LLM tool of choice is AMP still, and AMP is I mean, they're an agent, but the reason why I like them is they kind of choose your models for you. And it's less of a mental overhead of like, am I on the right model for this? Like, what model should I be thinking? Like, what model is good for like planning? What model is good for this? Like, you just kind of, they pick it based on your prompt that you're giving. And so I really like that. And I feel like their harness that they have around all their LLMs is good. And I respect all the engineers at that company and know that they're really good engineers that are getting a lot of value in building a really good agent from that. So I think that's the best. It is pricey, but usually you get the best output because you're not rate limited ever for anything like that. And you don't have to worry about being on the right plan or paying 200 a month. It's based on your usage. So I do that all in the CLI. And then I run Zed for my ID. And then my biggest frustration with that, I think Zed is a fantastic editor. Their Vim key mappings are fantastic, super fast, and I love their multi buffer. And one of the reasons why I like their multi buffer is because when I am working with an LLM, I'll kick it off in the CLI and then I'll go to Zed to review its work. And Zed's multi buffer is really nice because I can actually view all the changes in one pane and I can make edits to that. And what
Mhm.
I'll often do is I'll often put like comments to the LLM in there as I'm reviewing its code, just like I would an inline comment for GitHub, and say, hey, let's do this, or here we go, let's do this here. And then I'll go back to the CLI and say, okay, I left you a few comments in those changes, address those, and do whatever else. So it really becomes more like a PR review process in that sense. And so I think Zed's really good for that. My one thing I don't like about Zed is I don't like their AI tab completion. So I would love for AMP's tab completion in Zed, but I don't think that'll
Mhm.
ever happen. But that's
Yeah.
currently where I'm at right now. I play with other things. Like, I mean, as you know, I just played with Codex the other day. I've done Claude Code. I think they're all basically the
They're
same.
all good. They're
If
all
you,
good. I mean,
right.
yeah.
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 If you're prompting well and if you're giving it the right context, you're going to get a decent output 90
Yeah.
percent of the time.
Yeah, I feel like it's more about how you use it than about the tool itself at this point. And so let's talk about how a principal software engineer uses an LLM coding tool, because we're not just typing in like I have this Jira ticket that says to create this app, like go do this for me. Like that's not at
Yep.
all how it works. It's not like vibe coding is this term that's thrown around. And I feel like to me, vibe coding is letting the LLM do stuff that you don't understand.
Yep.
But that's not how we use it. So
No.
tell me how you use it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I probably spend a good couple of hours with just the agent creating plans before I started
A
anything.
couple of
So,
hours?
yeah.
Well, this must be a big project though.
Yeah, usually a bigger project. So like we're building out like UI extensions for custom third-party applications to allow app developers to embed their own custom UIs in all of our experiences like web and mobile and checkout and stuff like that, right?
So this is very
So
complex. It's like very new. Like there's
right.
no doc. We don't have any documentation on it. We don't have any
No.
existing code. You got to do a lot of planning.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so like as a principal I'm doing like high level architecture, but I'm also for this I'm the one implementing it too. So I'm getting at that. But yeah, I've probably spent in total probably 5 to 6 hours talking to an LLM just about how we should solve the problem. But I'm also reading Shopify's documentation. I'm giving the LLM Shopify's documentation as well. I'm running through plans. And I think the thing that I really enjoy the most doing that is I like playing models against each other in
Mm.
the planning phase. And so I'll jump on GPT-5. And this is the one time where I think it's helpful to be able to change models. I'll get on GPT-5, which I think is really good for a base, good high level plan, and I'll work through stuff with that. But then I'll jump over to Grok 4 and I'll say, what do you think about this plan? Here's the MD file that we created with the first model. And it'll usually give me feedback. And I'll usually go back to GPT-5, or I'll go to like just any other model, Gemini, if you have access to that. And I just play them off of each other for hours trying to really finesse it. And I ask it questions, and I'm like, I really want you to argue with me during this. Like, do not just tell me this is a good solution. And I'll even be like, what are some newer options that we have, not just what other competitors have implemented? What could we utilize that's like really new as well? Because I want to just get all new options. And then I usually have it like weigh pros and cons for things. So like I've had it look at iframes, web workers, web components, and all that stuff for these UI extensions is the best way to safely allow developers to inject custom code into our experiences so that they can't interact with our container apps or anything like that. So I just do a ton of that walkthrough. And when I'm happy with that, I'm reading the plan constantly. I mean, this is why it's hours, right? Like you're reading a ton, you're thinking through it, you're going off and just looking at what other things companies have done. And then from there, I go through it and I usually give it a GPT-5 again and say, okay, let's break this down into phases. And then I'm like, okay, let's break it down into small steps from there too. And so, depending on what the task is, if I will then have an LLM generate it, or I will write it by hand, depending on the complexity or the newness of
So
it.
you're just doing this in memory, or are you creating a scratch file?
Oh, I'm creating scratch files. So I always
Yeah.
have an agent directory. And inside of that, I have a plans directory and a tasks directory. And so, yeah, I always have a plan output, which has the overall plan. And then I have a tasks output file. And so whenever I pick up something new, I'm starting a new session every single time too. And so it's broken down into say like 10 phases for this UI extension plan. And so I'll start a new thread or session with L and be like, okay, here's the plan, here's the task file. We're going to start on phase one. What questions do you have before we start on this? Because I want to verify again that based on the plan and what the tasks have broken down, that it's correct, or that the LLM agent has everything it needs to accomplish it. And I'm like, okay, let's do this and this. And so then I'll go and review it as it's implementing it. If it's correct, I'll have it update the task file and commit those changes for that first phase or first task or whatever you're working on. And then I start a new session or thread for the next task. And so I give it the plan and I give it the tasks again. And I say, okay, what questions do you have? So it's basically a loop from there of working through it instead of saying, okay, here's your tasks of 10 phases, go for it. Right. Like you're going to get a bad output from that. Like
Mhm.
I at least have to make sure I'm walking through it with it. But the
Mhm.
benefit too is I can say, okay, it's going off and creating a service file and a repository file. It knows exactly what to do. It has the other files to follow, and walked through exactly the functionality and the functions that need to be written. I can go off and do something else, like while it's working on that, right? So that's the biggest benefit there.
And
But
so
that's the general flow. Yeah.
do you look at all of the code it outputs for each phase, all of
Yep.
it? And then how
All of it.
often are you telling it to make changes?
Depends on what it is, right? And so when it's like creating a very simple file that's just defining functions that reads from the database or writes to the database, I'm barely having to change anything because I already have 10 other files that do the exact same thing, and it can look at it and knows exactly how to parse the input and parse the output and stuff like that. So super easy, not having to change a lot or anything. Where I have to change it usually is when it's interacting with another library. And so I had to change a few things like for the S3 pre-signed URLs because it wasn't quite right. And I've had to change a few stuff based on my testing. So that's the other thing that I think is important. I'm not having it go through and just write everything to completion based on what it figured out and then testing it at the end, right? Like I'm manually verifying that each step and phase is complete when possible.
Is that,
Because
do you have it write unit tests and run them along the way then, stuff like that?
Yeah,
Okay.
unit test, but I also think it's important to manually test it too, because unit
Mhm.
test is really easy for an LLM to kind of fake itself that the
Yeah,
unit test is
totally.
passing, right? And so I haven't seen the benefit of an LLM writing all of your unit tests because it just mocks so much to get it to
Mhm.
pass that I'm like, are we
Yeah.
really testing anything? We're basically testing our own mocks and stuff
Yeah.
that I'm like, that doesn't feel super beneficial. It's still, I write them, but I think it's more important that if you're doing an API, building an API, you need to be testing that as soon as you possibly can. And so whenever I am testing, one of the cool things is I use Bruno for all of my API testing, and Bruno has a CLI tool that agents know about, and Bruno is all file based as well too, so it can see all of my example API requests that I have set up for my API. And so I'm like, okay, we've implemented this GraphQL query. Go create a Bruno request and then run it with the Bruno CLI and let's verify that it works. And I already have my app running locally and it's all set up with Docker and all that stuff. And so the agent then can run brew and the request that it wants, and it can see the output and it can know what it should be. And so that's another feedback loop that I can give it. And so that's a manual testing process. If I get a success, I can move on and know that it's good from there. So, I
Mhm.
mean, I really like that loop of being able to have it run the manual API test. But then there's still stuff that you need to run, like and manually test the whole flow yourself. It just, you can't assume that you're going to have a complete product at the end of a really long agent session where it's working through like 10 different phases and expect it to work.
Mhm.
So I think you do have to take it in phases and verify each phase, just like you would when you're coding. You just, the LLM's writing the code, but you're still in control and in charge.
Yeah, I think you brought up some important points. And I think even if you don't spend hours iterating on a plan, even for shorter tasks, going through a plan, and then a few of the things you said were like you have it look at different options. You don't just ask it for a solution and go with the first solution. And then you kind of iterate over solutions. And then possibly using different models, although I would argue that that's really not important for smaller tasks. It's more like for these larger things you're planning.
Yeah.
But and then having it challenge you and ask you questions is an interesting tactic as well. Coming up with a plan and then dividing that plan into chunks and then having it execute the plan or each chunk and then reviewing the output with both automated tests and manual tests at each step is a recipe for success. And I would add one more thing to this, which I know you're already doing, but maybe didn't mention explicitly, was providing the right context. So you
Yeah.
said you give the LLM, you say, here, I have an example file over here that you should look at, or you were saying you were looking at like Shopify docs. And so that's all about providing context. And I feel like if you provide the right context at the right time to an LLM, you have a very high probability of success. And most of the time, when we get these bad LLM outputs, it's because it doesn't have the right context at the right time. And
Right.
that's more difficult to do than it sounds like. But that is really the key to success to it, right?
Yeah. No, totally. And that's exactly what I'm doing when I say, here, I have all these other files that follow this convention. Like, do that. I'll usually point to the directory that has those files in it and it can look through it. Or yeah, and that's why I'll always give a new session the plan file and the task file as well too, that has all the context for what I've already spent hours and hours working on, also what we've previously worked on too.
Mhm.
And those task files usually have file references in
Mhm.
there too, that it can then dive into that to be like, oh, okay, wait, I'm working on this. I need to go look at how it was implemented. This other thing was implemented that I'm going to work with now. And so now it has in that task file the file path that it needs to go look at And so I've seen AMP do a better job of like more surgically being able to find the context that it needs without me even having to be like, okay, go look at this file. This is how we're going to do this. Now go look at this file, because all that's written to the task file as that artifact is more helpful in that. So that
Yeah.
reduces the burden on me doing that. The other one thing that I add is like I actually have been playing around a lot with voice input with like whisper flow and stuff like that. I feel like that has actually been super helpful during the planning phase. And so what I'll do is I'll kick that on and I just talk about what I want to do. And so I spend a good 5 minutes talking about the project. And then I say, okay, ask me questions one at a time. And so it will ask me the question back and I just talk back. So I'm not sitting
Mhm.
there like typing out these long responses. I'm just letting my brain to spew whatever. I don't have to worry about like typing in good. I know you don't have to worry about typing well for an LM anyway, but we tend to type more like precisely than we do talking, or at least I do. So I
Mhm.
just kind of
Yeah.
talk and I'll say or like I'll pause and think, and all these whisper flows and stuff do a good job of re- removing all that noise and clutter and then just being able to send that to the agent. So that's been super
Yeah.
helpful.
And Whisperflow, if you don't know, is a free voice dictation app that works for anywhere across your whole computer so that you just
Yep.
like press a key and it just fills in a text input and it doesn't matter where it is, which is really nice. That's
Yep.
another
It's
tool
actually
that I get for free from being friends with Wes.
get it for free for to a certain extent, I guess, until you get
Free
hooked,
as
and then
in
then you use
yeah,
up their limits. Yeah.
true. Free as in like I found out about it without putting any work into it.
Yeah.
One of the other things that I found myself doing a lot lately is I write way more documentation now and with the LLM, and it's more because I want it there to give the LLM context than I want for a human to read it, which is kind of sucks. But at the same time, like writing more documentation is good. So I'll write these documentations on like end-to-end request lifecycle and like how this particular tool is called and all this kind of stuff because if I want an LLM to do something, I want to just be like, just go read this file, and that'll just tell you everything you need to know, and then do this, like update this task.
Yep. Yeah, I need to get better at that. Every time I've had to write docs files, I've never gone back and used them because they've either been too like granular in an approach to what we were just working on and not generic or not foundationally built as like a doc side of how somebody would actually use it, right? It was more to like this is how we implemented it, not necessarily how you should use it. And so and that's probably just me needing to get better at prompting the LLM on how I want my docs to be written. But yeah, I mean that's something that I think I need to get better at is doing that. I do have it write all my README files. I haven't written a README file in months, which is really nice. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So you showed me the other day AMP inside of Tmux. Have you been using that?
no.
No.
I used
Okay.
it for like a day, and
Okay.
I think there's power there, but I need to spend like a week figuring it out. For
Yeah.
what? And I think it's important that you let's back up. Tmux and AMP can actually control Tmux, and so you can
Which
it
Tmux
can
is
know
what?
how. Tmux is a multi-session terminal runner, something like that. It allows you to run multiple terminal sessions in one window, and they're all isolated, right? Um, and so multiplexer or something like that.
Yeah.
And so yeah, AMP can control tmux, which is like basically like opening another pane in your terminal and running your developer or your app in there while you have another pane open working on your LLM agent or something like that. And so if you tell AMP to how to use tmux, it can actually navigate to those panes and run commands in them or view the output of what's already running in those separate panes within your
Mhm.
tmux session. And so the power of that is it can automatically know if you have it properly set up. You can say like you have a tmux session set up with three panes, and one of them is going to be your agent, one of them is going to be your API running, and another one's going to be I don't know, some other log service that you're tailing or something like that.
Mhm.
And if you have that pre-set up, you can then make sure TMUP or AMP has the context that it needs to know what's running in each pane so that you can say, okay, we're going to work on this task. Once you complete, we're going to verify it because the app's running in this pane and our logs are in this pane, and you want to go and verify it. And then in pane 4, you should use the Bruno CLI to actually make requests and then watch the logs in that. So it can control all that, but you have to really be set up well on how you want that structured. And so I think that's the reason why I haven't really dug into it, is because you have to really put that forefront work in of making sure you know exactly how you want it to run, and that the agent then knows all the commands that it needs to get the information it needs. And so
Mhm.
I think it's powerful. I think it's where it's probably really work well is if you're like building a CLI or something like that, where it's all right there in the terminal and it tends to know how to get the outputs out and stuff. But for like a UI, I don't think it'd be very beneficial. API is there, but it just takes more work to do. So
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's more figuring that out of how you want to work. And I think it's probably just faster just to go and copy and paste some output
Mhm.
logs to the agent for 99% of the stuff.
Yeah, it's one of those things I really want to use because it sounds so useful, but you have to put in that upfront time, like you said, and I just don't have that time, or I don't take the time to do those kind of
Right.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think very few people are structured enough in how they have their development environments running to really take advantage of it. It's more like, to me, it's like Vim versus VS Code with your agent, right? VS Code, just you just go in and you work it, but with Vim, you really want to set it up exactly how you as a developer you want to do, or you can, right? And you know, you spend the time basically building up your developer experience. And so I think if you do that with Tmux and an agent, it probably would be really beneficial, but you really have to invest in it to make it
Mhm.
worthwhile and define your developer workflow with agents in that way.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay, so we have like 5 minutes left. What do you see happening with our jobs and software engineering in general with AI in the next year versus like 5 years?
In the next year, our jobs are safe. I mean, I think in 5 years, our jobs are safe.
Yeah,
Again, I think it
agreed.
goes back to the tool. It's a tool that we're using, and we have to adapt to that tool.
Mhm.
Um, I'm more concerned in the next year and 5 years with new software engineers
Mhm.
than older ones, because of the way that, and this is probably just our own expectation or assumption of this, because of the way that we learned by bashing our heads against the walls because we were missing a semicolon. In PHP, if
Mhm.
you're doing WordPress and you're like, why is this not working, only to find that you're missing a semicolon, right?
Mhm.
And new engineers now don't have to worry about that stuff anymore. And so I think we are all having to adapt the way that we learn, but especially new engineers have to adapt even more so. But for now, in the next year, if you're an older engineer or more experienced engineer and you're not using these tools, you're going to get left behind um,
Yeah.
in promotions and productivity and stuff like that. Because I do think there is a productivity boost
Yeah,
by all means with
for
this.
sure.
And so, yeah, I don't think jobs are going anywhere. I think we're going to get asked to do more with less as engineers at companies.
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
And that's either going to turn out to be a good thing or a bad thing. I think more slop code is going to be produced
Hmm.
in the long run. So probably in 5 years, we'll have to deal with that,
Hmm.
of what we've done in the race of AI adoption in these first couple of years. Um, but I mean, that's no different than any adoption of any new tool
Yeah,
out there.
yeah, there's like this, oh, now engineers don't have to be the only ones writing code, but what I've found is the ones when engineers don't write the code and they vibe code it, then they need an engineer to review it and fix all the problems. And
Yep.
so it doesn't really work that way.
No,
So
not at all.
yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I agree with you though, generally. I think like one of the things though I'm curious about with younger engineers, do you think this is the same thing as these guys who learned like started in C and they're like, oh, these young guys now are just learning JavaScript and they don't have to deal with like memory management and like
Yep.
garbage collection and stuff, and that they're just going to be these terrible programmers, and like maybe we are terrible programmers, but like we're still like building lots of stuff that gets used by lots of
Right.
people. So, you know.
I think that's exactly what it is, right? Like, I mean, with any revolution, we always adapt to the new thing, right? And so we're going to adapt and learn how to work with these new tools. And it's just a matter of personally how quickly and how well you adapt to it too. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just like that C to Java or basic to JavaScript type stuff where that switch where everybody adapts, but people will argue about it or say, "Oh no, this you're not going to be a good engineer," but people figure out how to be a good engineer. I think it's just the biggest gap for now is going from deterministic to indeterministic results, right? And I think that's the biggest issue that we have to solve and adapt to, that is a complete unknown from everything that we've had before with software engineering, because everything before, no matter what, has been still deterministic. It's just
Mhm.
been a matter of, again, how you write the code. But we've changed how we write the code, and we've also made it indeterministic, which is going to be a problem that we have to solve to, or continue to work with.
Yeah, lots of interesting stuff coming up. That's for sure. It is an interesting time to be a software engineer.
100%. It's
Yeah,
fun, scary,
yeah,
but
it
mostly
is.
fun.
Yeah, I agree. So, where can people find you, or what do you want to plug before we drop here?
Mostly on Twitter, LinkedIn, but I'm also building an app called Find Your Deductions. So if you deal with taxes and you hate having to go through all your transactions to find all your tax deductions, hit it up. It's just findyourdeductions.com. So it's new. We'd love everybody's feedback and give it a try.
Great. All right, Wes. Good talking to you.
Cool, man. Thanks, man.
See you.
Appreciate it. See ya.